I've always believed that trust is like a house of cards, delicate, intricate, and prone to collapse with the slightest tremor. For 16 years, I thought my marriage to Claire was a fortress, not a flimsy stack of cards. We'd built a life together in our cozy suburban home in Asheville, North Carolina, with its wraparound porch and creaky wooden floors that groaned under the weight of our shared history. 2 kids, a golden retriever named Max, and a rhythm to our days that felt as steady as the sunrise. I was a structural engineer, designing bridges that could withstand hurricanes, and Claire was a high school art teacher, her hands always smudged with charcoal or paint. We were ordinary, maybe even predictable, but I loved that about us. I loved her laugh, sharp and sudden like a burst of sunlight through clouds. I loved how she'd leave post-it notes on my lunch bag with silly doodles or quotes from poets I'd never read. I loved her, plain and simple. But love, I've learned, can blind you to the cracks forming beneath your feet. It started with small things, the kind you dismiss because life is busy and you're too tired to overthink. Claire began staying late at school, claiming she was organizing an art show for her students. She'd come home with her hair slightly mussed, her eyes bright in a way that didn't match the exhaustion she described. "The kids are so talented this year," she'd say, pouring herself a glass of wine and collapsing onto the couch. I'd nod, kiss her forehead, and think nothing of it. She was passionate about her work. Always had been. Then there were the phone calls. She'd step outside to take them, her voice low and clipped, the screen of her phone tilted away from me when she returned. "Just a parent," she'd say, or "Colleen from the department, you know how she rambles." I didn't know Colleen, not really, but I trusted Claire's world to be as innocent as she made it sound. Why wouldn't I? Trust was our foundation. The first real jolt came in September 6 months ago. I'd come home early from a site visit, my boots still caked with mud from a construction site in Greenville. The house was quiet, the kids at soccer practice, Max snoring on his bed by the fireplace. Claire's car was in the driveway, which was odd. She'd said she had a staff meeting until 6. I called out her name, my voice echoing in the empty foyer. No answer. I climbed the stairs, figuring she was napping or lost in one of her sketchbooks. Our bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open, and there she was, sitting cross-legged on the bed, her phone pressed to her ear. Her face was flushed, her lips curled in a smile I hadn't seen in years. Not the warm, familiar one she gave me, but something secretive, almost giddy. She didn't notice me at first, too absorbed in her conversation. "I know," she was saying, her voice soft, intimate. "I can't stop thinking about it either. Tomorrow, same time." My stomach twisted. I stood frozen, the mud on my boots smearing the hardwood floor. She looked up then, her eyes widening, the smile vanishing like a light switch flipped off. "I've got to go," she said into the phone, her voice sharp now, and hung up without another word. "Who was that?" I asked, my throat tight. She scrambled off the bed, smoothing her hair. "God, you scared me, David. It was just a colleague. We're planning the art show." Sounded like more than that. I didn't mean to sound accusatory, but the words came out hard, edged with something I didn't recognize in myself. Her laugh was forced, too high-pitched. "What? No, come on. You're being ridiculous." She walked past me, brushing my arm as if to dismiss the moment, and headed downstairs. "I need to start dinner." I stood there, staring at the bed, the rumpled comforter where she'd been sitting. My mind raced, replaying her voice, the way she'd said, "I can't stop thinking about it either." I wanted to believe her, to chalk it up to my own paranoia. But something had shifted, a hairline fracture in the trust I'd taken for granted. Over the next few weeks, I became a man I didn't recognize. I started checking things. Her phone when she left it on the counter. Her email when she forgot to log out of our shared laptop. I hated myself for it, but the need to know was a gnawing thing, like a splinter I couldn't dig out. There was nothing concrete at first, just vague texts to a contact named Art Supply that could have been about paintbrushes or could have been code for something else. "Meet me at the studio, 4 p.m. or missed you today." No replies saved, no call logs to confirm. She was careful if there was anything to be careful about. I tried to talk to her, to bridge the gap I felt widening between us. One night, after the kids were asleep, I poured us both wine and sat her down in the living room. "Are we okay?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She looked at me, her hazel eyes softening. "Of course we are. Why would you even ask that?" "I don't know. You've been distant, busy. I just want to make sure we're good." She reached for my hand, her fingers warm against mine. "I'm sorry. It's just the art show, the kids' projects. It's a lot. I promise we're fine." I wanted to believe her. I did. But her touch felt different, like she was holding my hand out of habit, not desire. I nodded, kissed her, and let the moment pass. But the splinter remained. By October, I was obsessed. I started driving by the school when she said she was staying late. Most nights, her car was there, the art room's windows glowing with soft light. I'd park across the street, watching shadows move behind the curtains, telling myself I was crazy. But one night, her car wasn't there. She texted me at 5, saying she'd be home by 7, stuck grading portfolios. I drove to the school anyway, my heart pounding. The lot was empty except for the janitor's truck. I called her, my hands shaking. She answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful. "Hey, I'm just wrapping up. Be home soon." "Where are you?" I asked, staring at the dark school building. "At school, silly. Where else?" I hung up without another word. I drove home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. When she walked through the door at 7:15, her hair damp from a shower she claimed she'd taken at the school's gym, I didn't confront her. Couldn't. The kids were there, clamoring for her attention, and the normalcy of it all, their laughter, her teasing, made me question everything. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was losing my mind. But I wasn't. Deep down, I knew. The truth came crashing down in November, on a cold, rainy afternoon. I'd taken a half day to meet with a client in town, but the meeting was canceled last minute. I stopped by the school to surprise Claire, maybe take her out for coffee. Her car was in the lot, parked next to a sleek black SUV I didn't recognize. I walked into the art building, the hall's quiet, most classes done for the day. The art room was at the end of the corridor, its door slightly open. I heard her voice before I saw her, that same soft, intimate tone from the phone call months ago. "You're impossible," she was saying, her voice laced with a laugh. I pushed the door open. There she was, standing too close to a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a smug smile that made my blood boil. His hand was on her arm, casual but possessive. Claire's face was tilted up toward him, her eyes bright, her lips parted. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in whatever moment they were sharing. "Claire," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. She spun around, her face paling. The man stepped back, his hand dropping from her arm. "David," she stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Who's this?" I asked, my eyes locked on the man. He extended a hand, his smile unwavering. "Mark, I'm a parent. Just discussing my daughter's portfolio." I didn't shake his hand. I looked at Claire, waiting for her to explain, to make this make sense. She didn't. She just stood there, her hands twisting together, her eyes darting between us. "We need to talk," I said, turning and walking out. I didn't look back to see if she followed. She did, of course. In the car, she tried to explain. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice trembling. He's been helping with the art show. His daughter's in my class. We've been working together, that's all." "Working together?" I repeated, my voice flat. "In empty classrooms? Standing so close you could kiss him?" "David, please. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" I pulled into our driveway, cutting the engine. "Then why lie about where you were? Why the secret calls? Why does he look at you like he owns you?" She didn't answer. She got out of the car, slamming the door, and went inside. That night, we slept in separate rooms for the first time in 16 years. The next day, I hired a private investigator. I didn't tell Claire. I didn't want her to know how far I'd fallen, how desperate I was for the truth. The investigator, a gruff man named Tom with a smoker's cough, called me a week later. "They're meeting at a motel off Route 40, he said. "Tuesdays and Thursdays. Like clockwork. I've got photos." He emailed them to me. I sat at my desk, staring at the grainy images of Claire and Mark walking into a room. Her hand in his, her smile the one I'd seen that day on our bed. My chest ached, a physical pain I couldn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, the house of cards collapsing around me. I didn't confront her yet. Couldn't. Not until I knew what I wanted to do. But the anger was there, simmering, waiting for a spark. And when I thought of Mark, of his smug smile and his hand on her arm, I knew one thing for certain. He'd pay. They both would. The days after receiving those photos from the private investigator felt like walking through a fog so thick I could barely see my own hands. My life, once so clear and structured like the bridges I designed, had become a maze of betrayal and doubt. Claire moved through our home as if nothing had changed. Her smile a little too bright, her touch a little too quick, like she was trying to outrun the truth. I played along, nodding at her stories about school, kissing her cheek before bed. But inside, I was unraveling. The photos were burned into my mind. Claire's hand in Mark's, her laugh caught mid-frame as they slipped into that motel room. I kept them hidden in a locked folder on my laptop, a digital wound I couldn't stop prodding. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception, to know how far it went, how long it had been happening. And more than that, I needed a plan. My anger wasn't loud or explosive. It was cold, precise, like the calculations I made to ensure a bridge wouldn't buckle under pressure. I wanted justice, not chaos. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done. Tom, the private investigator, became my shadow companion. I'd meet him in the parking lot of a diner on the edge of town, his beat-up Ford smelling of stale coffee and cigarettes. He'd slide manila envelopes across the table, each one heavier than the last. "They're careful," he told me one evening, his voice gravelly, "but not careful enough. They meet twice a week, always the same motel. She leaves her car at the school, rides with him. No texts, no emails I can find. They're using burner phones or something else." "How long?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "Hard to say exactly. My guess? At least 6 months, maybe a year. Could be longer. A year." The thought made my stomach churn. A year of lies, of her coming home to me, to our kids, with his touch still lingering on her skin. I thanked Tom, paid him in cash, and drove home, the envelope unopened on the passenger seat. I didn't need to see more photos. I needed to know who Mark was, what made him think he could step into my life and take what was mine. I started digging. Mark Thompson, I learned, was a real estate developer, 42 years old, married with a teenage daughter who was indeed in Claire's art class. His wife, Ellen, was a pediatrician, polished and professional, the kind of woman who hosted charity galas and posted family photos on Instagram with captions about gratitude. Their daughter, Sophie, was 16, a shy girl with a talent for watercolor, according to Claire's glowing comments at parent-teacher conferences. Mark's life looked perfect on paper. Big house in the hills, a Tesla in the driveway, a reputation as a charming businessman who closed deals with a handshake and a smile. That smile. I hated it more every time I saw it in my mind. I found his office downtown, a sleek glass building with his name on a brass plaque, Thompson Properties. I drove by one afternoon, not sure what I was looking for, just needing to see where he spent his days. I parked across the street, watching men in suits come and go, their briefcases swinging like pendulums. Mark emerged at noon, laughing with a colleague, his tie loosened, his confidence radiating like heat. I gripped the steering wheel, imagining walking up to him, demanding answers. But I didn't. I wasn't ready. Instead, I turned my attention to Claire. I started tracking her movements, not with Tom's help but my own. I checked the mileage on her car, noting the extra trips that didn't add up. I'd linger in the kitchen when she thought I was asleep, listening to her hushed phone calls in the backyard. Once I followed her. It was a Thursday, one of their motel days. I watched her leave the school, climb into Mark's SUV, and drive to the motel on Route 40. I sat in my truck, 100 yards away, my hands shaking as I saw them disappear inside. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. The truth was a knife, and every moment I spent watching them twisted it deeper. At home, I kept up the facade. I helped the kids with homework, took Max for walks, even planned a family camping trip for the spring. Claire seemed relieved, as if my normalcy meant she was safe. But her eyes betrayed her. There was a flicker of guilt, a hesitation when she looked at me too long. I wondered if she sensed the change in me, the way my silences had grown heavier, my touches less frequent. I didn't want to touch her anymore, not when I knew where her hands had been. The idea for revenge came slowly, like a blueprint taking shape. I didn't want to just confront them, to yell and break things. That was too easy, too fleeting. I wanted something that would last, something that would make them feel the same hollow ache I carried. I started by learning more about Mark's life. I followed him, discreetly, on weekends when Claire thought I was at the office. I saw him at soccer games, cheering for Sophie, his arm around Ellen's waist. I saw him at a local bar, laughing with clients, buying rounds like he owned the world. I saw the way people looked at him, admiring, trusting, oblivious to the snake he was. I began to gather pieces, small at first. I hacked into his public social media accounts. Not hard, given how many people reuse passwords. I found nothing incriminating, just polished photos and vague posts about living the good life. But I kept digging, accessing public records, business filings, anything I could find. Mark's company had a few questionable deals. Properties bought at suspiciously low prices, permits fast-tracked under murky circumstances. It wasn't enough to destroy him, but it was a start. Then I turned to Ellen. I didn't know her, had never met her, but I felt a strange kinship with her, another victim of their betrayal. I wondered if she suspected anything, if she noticed the same small signs I had. I created a fake email account and sent her an anonymous message. * check your husband's Thursday afternoons. You might be surprised. * I didn't expect a reply and I didn't get one, but I hoped it planted a seed. At home, I started planting seeds of my own. I'd leave subtle hints for Claire, mentioning a motel I'd heard about on Route 40, asking casual questions about her art show partner, watching her squirm. What's his name again? Mark something? I'd say, my tone light but my eyes sharp. She'd laugh it off, change the subject, but I saw the panic in her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she poured her wine. One night I pushed harder. We were in the kitchen, the kids asleep, the dishwasher humming. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Claire, are you happy? I asked, my voice calm but deliberate. She froze, her glass halfway to her lips. What? Of course I am. Why would you ask that? I don't know. You seem distracted, like there's something else on your mind. She set the glass down, her movements careful. It's just work, David. You know how it gets. I nodded, letting the silence stretch. If there's ever anything you need to tell me, you can. You know that, right? Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I thought she might confess. But she just smiled, that forced brightness I'd come to hate. I know. I love you. I love you too, I said, the words tasting like ash. The real turning point came in December, at the school's winter art show. Claire had been talking about it for weeks, her excitement a performance I no longer believed. I went not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see them together to gauge how far their charade went in public. The gym was transformed into a gallery, student paintings hung on temporary walls, fairy lights strung across the ceiling. Claire was in her element, flitting between parents and students, her laugh echoing. I stood by the punch table watching her. Mark was there, of course, with Ellen and Sophie. He wore a tailored blazer, his arm around his daughter's shoulders, playing the proud father. But I saw the glances he threw Claire's way, the way her eyes lingered on him when she thought no one was watching. It was subtle, but to me it was a neon sign. Ellen, oblivious, chatted with other parents, her smile warm and genuine. I felt a pang of guilt for her, but it was drowned out by the anger simmering in my veins. I approached Mark when he was alone, refilling his punch. "Nice event," I said, my voice neutral. He turned, his smile automatic. "Yeah, Claire did a great job. You must be proud." "Very," I said, holding his gaze. "You're Sophie's dad, right?" "Mark." "That's me." His handshake was firm, his eyes assessing. "And you're David, right? Claire's husband." I nodded, my smile tight. "She's mentioned you. Said you've been a big help with the art show." "Just doing my part," he said, his tone too smooth. "Sophie loves her class." We stood there, two men lying to each other, the air thick with unspoken truths. I wanted to grab him, to demand why he thought he could touch my wife, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "Good to meet you. I'm sure we'll see more of each other." His smile faltered, just for a second. "Yeah, I'm sure." That night, as Claire and I drove home, she was quiet, her hands twisted in her lap. "You okay?" I asked, glancing at her. "Fine," she said too quickly. "Just tired." I didn't push. I didn't need to. The plan was forming, sharp and clear in my mind. I'd been gathering pieces. Mark's business dealings, Claire's lies, Ellen's ignorance, and now I saw how they could fit together. Revenge wasn't about confrontation or violence. It was about dismantling their world, piece by piece, until they had nothing left to hide behind. By January, I had a strategy. I'd expose Mark's shady deals, not just to Ellen but to his clients, his partners, the whole town. I'd make sure Claire's role in their affair was known. Not through a screaming match but through whispers, through the slow bleed of reputation. I'd let their own actions bury them. And I'd do it without ever raising my voice. I started small, leaking tips to a local journalist about Thompson Properties' questionable permits. I sent more anonymous emails to Ellen, this time with dates and times of Mark's motel visits. I even slipped a note into Sophie's art portfolio, left on display at the school. "Ask your dad where he goes on Thursdays." Cruel, maybe, but I was past caring. They'd hurt me, hurt my family, and I wanted them to feel it. At home, I kept Claire close, playing the devoted husband while I watched her unravel. She was jumpier now, her phone never out of her sight, her excuses flimsier. I didn't let on that I knew. I wanted her to feel the walls closing in, to wonder when the truth would come crashing down. It was only a matter of time. The air in our house had turned brittle by February, like glass waiting to shatter. Claire moved through our routines with a forced cheerfulness, her eyes darting to mine when she thought I wasn't looking. Searching for signs, I knew her secret. I gave her none. I'd become a master at wearing the mask of the oblivious husband. Cooking dinners, helping our kids with their science projects, walking Max through the snowy trails behind our house. But beneath it all, I was a man possessed, my every thought consumed by the plan I'd been building for months. It wasn't enough to know Claire and Mark had betrayed me. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, to see their carefully constructed lives crumble under the truth. And I wanted it to hurt. The pieces I'd set in motion were starting to move. The anonymous tips I'd sent to the local journalist, a tenacious woman named Rachel who wrote for the Asheville Citizen-Times, had taken root. She'd been sniffing around Thompson Properties, digging into the permits and land deals I'd flagged. I'd fed her just enough. Public records, a few pointed questions about zoning irregularities, to spark her interest without leaving a trail back to me. By mid-February, her first article appeared, a small piece buried in the business section. Questions raised over Thompson Properties' recent acquisitions. It didn't name Mark directly, but it hinted at discrepancies in how his company had secured prime real estate at below-market prices. I watched him at a school event a few days later, his smile tighter than usual, his eyes scanning the room as if he sensed the noose tightening. Ellen, Mark's wife, was another piece of the puzzle. My anonymous emails had been vague at first, just enough to plant doubt. But in January, I'd escalated, sending her a photo from Tom's collection. Mark and Claire entering the motel, their hands brushing, her face lit with that secretive smile. I'd used a burner email, untraceable, and included a simple message. "He's not where he says he is." I didn't know if she'd confront him, but I saw the change in her at the next soccer game. She stood apart from Mark, her arms crossed, her face a mask of polite detachment. Sophie, their daughter, hovered between them, her usual shyness replaced by a quiet unease. I felt a twinge of guilt for involving her, for the note I'd slipped into her portfolio, but it was fleeting. They'd brought this on themselves. Claire was unraveling too, though she tried to hide it. Her late nights at school had tapered off, as if she sensed the danger of her routine with Mark. Her phone was now password protected, a change I noticed but didn't comment on. She'd stopped leaving it on the counter, stopped taking those hushed calls in the backyard. But her nervousness betrayed her. Dropped forks at dinner, forgotten appointments, a distracted air that even the kids noticed. "Is Mom okay?" Our daughter, Lily, asked one evening, her brow furrowed as she watched Claire fumble with the laundry. "She's just stressed," I said, ruffling Lily's hair. "Work stuff." But I knew better. I'd started leaving my own subtle traps, testing her. I'd mention Mark casually, dropping his name into conversations about the art show or Sophie's progress. "He seems like a hands-on dad," I'd say, watching her flinch, or I'd bring up Route 40, joking about a shady motel I'd passed on a site visit. Her reactions were small, a tightened jaw, a quick change of subject, but they confirmed what I already knew. She was scared, and she had reason to be. By March, the plan was ready to ignite. I'd spent weeks gathering the final pieces, working late in my home office while Claire slept, unaware of the storm I was orchestrating. I'd hired Tom again, this time to tail Mark's business partner, a slick developer named Greg who handled the financial side of Thompson Properties. Tom found what I'd suspected. Greg was skimming profits, funneling money into offshore accounts while Mark took the public heat for their deals. I didn't care about Greg's crimes, but they were leverage. I sent Rachel another anonymous tip, this time with bank records Tom had dug up. Nothing directly implicating Mark, but enough to cast a shadow over his company. The second article hit on March 10th, front page of the business section. Thompson Properties under scrutiny for financial irregularities. The word fraud wasn't used, but it hung in the air. The fallout was immediate. I saw it in Mark's face at a school fundraiser the next week. His charm was gone, replaced by a haggard look, his eyes shadowed, his tie askew. Ellen wasn't with him, and Sophie clung to her mother's absence like a shield, her watercolor display ignored as she stood alone. I approached him, unable to resist the chance to twist the knife. "Rough week?" I asked, offering a sympathetic smile. He forced a laugh, but it was hollow. "You read the paper, huh? Just business nonsense. It'll blow over." "I'm sure," I said, my tone neutral. "Must be tough, though, with all the attention." He looked at me then, really looked, and I wondered if he suspected anything. But he just nodded, muttered something about needing to check on Sophie, and walked away. I watched him go, feeling the first real spark of satisfaction. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The next phase was Claire. I'd saved her for last, knowing her punishment had to be personal, precise. I didn't want to just steward her, to humiliate her publicly. I wanted her to feel the slow burn of exposure, the weight of her own shame. I started by inviting key people to a surprise art gallery event I claimed Claire had organized. I used her email account, her password was our anniversary date, a bitter irony, to send invitations to colleagues, parents, school board members, and, crucially, Ellen and Mark. The event was set for a local gallery space, rented under the pretense of showcasing student work. I arranged for a projector, a catering service, and a private room for what I called a special presentation. The night of the event, the gallery buzzed with chatter. Claire was radiant, thinking it was her moment to shine as an art teacher. She mingled, unaware of what was coming. Mark arrived late, alone, his face pale. I caught his eye across the room, and he looked away, his shoulders tense. Ellen hadn't shown, which was fine. She'd get the message soon enough. I took the stage, a small platform in the center of the gallery, and thanked everyone for coming. Claire stood near the front, beaming with pride. I clicked the projector on, and the screen lit up with a photo of her and Mark, their arms around each other outside the motel. The room went silent. Claire's face froze, her glass of wine trembling in her hand. Whispers started, heads turning. "This," I said, my voice calm but firm, "is what's been happening behind my back, behind all our backs." I clicked to the next image, a receipt from the motel, dated 6 months ago. Then another, a blurry shot of them kissing in his SUV. I'd planned every detail, ensuring the images were clear enough to be undeniable but vague enough to avoid legal trouble. Claire dropped her glass, the shatter echoing in the stunned silence. "David," she whispered, stepping toward me, but I held up a hand. "I trusted you," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. 16 years, 2 kids, a home. And you chose him. I pointed at Mark, who stood frozen near the back, his face ashen. A man who lies to his own family, who risks his company for a cheap thrill. The room erupted in murmurs. Claire's colleagues stared, some with pity, others with disgust. Parents whispered to each other, their eyes darting to Mark. Sophie, who'd been standing by her paintings, ran out, tears streaming. I felt a pang, but I pushed it down. This was justice. I turned to Claire. "You thought I wouldn't find out. You thought you could play me for a fool." I clicked to a final slide, a screenshot of Mark's company's financial records, highlighting suspicious transactions. "And you," I said, turning to Mark, "thought your money and charm could buy you out of consequences. But not this time." Mark pushed through the crowd, heading for the door. I let him go. The damage was done. Claire tried to follow me as I left the stage, but I brushed past her, ignoring her pleas. The crowd parted for me, their eyes a mix of shock and respect. I didn't look back. The next day, the town was abuzz. Rachel's next article named Mark explicitly, linking him to both the financial scandal and the affair, citing credible sources. Ellen filed for divorce within a week, taking Sophie with her. Mark's company lost major clients, its reputation in tatters. Claire moved out, begging me to talk, but I refused. I filed for divorce, seeking full custody of the kids. The kids were devastated, but I shielded them as best I could, promising a new start. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece, my bridges stronger than ever. Claire and Mark's worlds collapsed, their shame a public spectacle. My revenge was complete. Not a scream, not a fist, but a calculated dismantling of their lies. And as I stood on my porch watching the sunrise, I felt no joy, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served.